All right, I think that's my cue. It is 1 p.m. on October 11th. So we are going to get started with our street committee meeting. First item is going to be our call to order. And so Steph, will you please call roll?
I would be happy to. I will go down the list alphabetical order by last name. Grant Anderson. I saw Grant, maybe he's just
Hey,
not.
Grant, you might be on mute.
Yes. Okay, we can circle back. Charles Andrews.
Here.
Thank you. Keith Brown.
Here.
Thank you. Bryce Christo.
Here.
Thank you. Jerry Cooper.
Here.
Thank you. Maria Deeb.
Present.
Thank you. Nathan Domi.
Here.
Thank you. Keith Dranaski. David Fabiano. Jennifer Jack.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Lair.
Here.
Thank you. Arian Larange.
I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you. Paul Lopez.
Donna Willett in for Paul Lopez.
Thank you. All right, Madam Chair is here. Jamie McCracken. Brad Novacek. Steve O'Brien.
Here.
Thank you. Dana Oswiani.
I'm here.
Thank you. Erman Pedrahita.
Here.
Thank you. Matt Reeg.
Present.
Thank you. Patrick Sage. Patrick, maybe you're on mute. I see that you're here.
Sorry about that. Present.
Thank you. Christopher Salas.
Present.
Thank you. Raquel Schatz. Eric Stewart.
Here.
Thank you. Leticia Vargas.
Here.
Thank you. Christopher Wanamaker. Okay, is there anyone I missed? I think there was Grant, Keith, and David, if any one of you are here. Okay, either way, we have quorum, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Steph.
Thank you.
Given that we have quorum, this meeting of the MAG Street Committee is called to order. As a reminder, please mute your microphone to eliminate any feedback. You will have the opportunity to raise your hand in the chat to be recognized, at which time you can unmute your microphone to talk. When you begin speaking, please state your name and your organization. And with that, we'll go to item number 2, which is call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. MAG staff, have we received any public comments?
Madam Chair, we have not received any public comments for this item or any other item on the agenda.
All right. We will then move on to item number 3, the transportation staff report. MAG staff member Patrick Stone will now provide updates and a report to the committee. Patrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Pleasure to be here. A few items for the committee this afternoon. First, the agency meetings update. MAG staff met with member agencies in August and September. Great conversations with each agency, discussing projects that we show in our tip, discussing fiscal year 23 and any other items that the agencies wanted to follow up on. I kind of want to provide where we're at. We've sent out to each agency a listing of all the projects that we discussed. We clarified the notes we heard. Thank yous to staff for taking all the notes. We put those notes down. We also put a column in that showed what action MAG had based on the notes we received from the member agencies. Sent that back out to member agencies with a couple weeks to provide feedback. Mainly, did we hear what you said correctly? Are we doing the right things? And then we're starting to get those workbooks back. Steph has been accumulating them all in a master file. What we'll then do once we have all of the workbooks back, we'll go through that entire listing, make those clerical changes that we noted that we need to do, but also we'll be going back out to member agencies where we heard conversations about changing project limits, potentially looking at deferrals, and get that confirmation one last time from the agencies that we're on the right path with that action. Some items will actually be conformity contingent based on where we're at in the conformity cycle. We'll be picking those back up in the spring, but we'll certainly get to those. But just again, a big thank you to all the agencies. It turned out very well. One question we had, will you be doing this again? We'll wait and see. I thought it turned out pretty well. If we do it again, most likely we'd be looking at sort of an annual activity and maybe picking that up late summer 23 to again talk about perhaps fiscal year 24. Next item on my report is the discretionary grant update. I've made mention of this in the past. I've done some presentations at various committees, just reviewing how the discretionary grant process works at MAG. The intent is to bring this as a presentation to Street Committee next month in November. One thing we've seen in the couple of months that I've been tracking this and running this through the committees, the data changes as fast as you can actually put an agenda item out. So we've had it where we've posted the agenda and the next day we get a notice of funding opportunity from USDOT saying this next grant is out. So one thing as part of the grant update we'll be doing next month is having the conversation about how best to reach member agencies, maybe potentially looking at a website or a web page that would allow us to kind of keep that information fresh. Next item, off-system bridge call for projects. I sent an email out to members of the Street Committee last Friday, noting that ADOT has begun their next call for projects. This one is quite unique in that there are two funding sources in this call for projects. There's the standard surface transportation funding that ADOT usually solicits every year. It's about just under $4 million, requires a 5.7% federal match. But new this year is the Bridge Formula Program, which is, I think it's just under 6,750,000 of federal funding that does not require a match. So it'll be very interesting to see what kind of interest ADOT gets. Member agencies certainly more than welcome to submit eligible projects. As noted in the email, MAG respectfully requests that you submit the applications to us by December 9th. That gives Aisha a little bit of time to put those together, and then we will actually be putting the package together to ADOT. As always, one thing with off-system bridge, as the name implies, the bridge has to be located off the federal aid highway system, which really is looking at rural minor collectors and local roads. But certainly if any of the agencies have one of those projects, would be delighted to have that application come in and submit that over to ADOT. And then the final item, federal fund programming guidelines. Having internal discussions, the guidelines were last updated June of 2015. We've begun a preliminary rewrite of the guidelines, mainly clearing up some confusion in the guidelines, updating some dates. The intent as well, this will be coming to Street Committee in November. So obviously we already have 2 items on the agenda for next month. And the goal is to introduce our plan in the update of the guidelines, have a draft version ready for committee members to consume, and then looking for your feedback. Are there things in the guidelines that don't make sense where you'd want us to clarify, perhaps do better at explaining or clarifying why a thing is allowed or is not allowed? So the thought is give that out to member agencies, give you a few weeks to review and reflect on that. And then the goal will be to take those updates that you provide, take them through Transportation Review Committee, either in December or January, depending on where things fall, get their hopeful support of the revisions, and then we'll go back out kind of like we did in the guidebook this year, get that cleaned up, make it an easier document to view and review, and then take that through the policy committees early in calendar year 2023. And with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Did we have any questions? Maria, looks like you have a question. Did you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, María Angélica Deep, City of Mesa. Patrick and Madam Chair, are you going to have any meeting to discuss the end of the ALCP coming next and the requirements every agency has to do to finalize that? And if projects haven't been done or need to change, what has to happen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Deeb. So as everyone's well aware, and we've messaged this multiple times, one of the things really that's kind of top of mind right now is the veto of the enabling legislation. I think, Maria, that's going to be a critical path forward as we look at how we, not just the ALCP, it involves something the committee is very interested in. Our next call for projects. Some of that was going to be start being based on the extension and enabling legislation. So we're kind of focused right now on enabling legislation, getting that hopefully to a finish line. Once I think we have some clarity there, then we can start looking at those policy considerations of potentially a transition from ALCP 1.0 to ALCP 2.0. But definitely that will be coming back through all of the appropriate committees, Maria.
Any other questions for Patrick or MAG staff? I don't see any. All right, thank you, Patrick. We will move on to item number 4, which is approval of the minutes. So please take a few moments to review the minutes from the August 9th meeting if you have not already. And at this time, does any committee member have any revisions to these minutes? All right, seeing none.
Move for approval of the minutes, Madam Chair.
Thank you, David. And do we have a second?
I second.
We have Maria as our second. Since this is an action item, we will do a roll call. Steph, whenever you're ready, if you can begin that.
Absolutely. Starting from the top, Grant Anderson.
Here, yes.
Thank you. Charles Andrews.
Yes.
Thank you. Keith Brown.
Yes.
Thank you. Bryce Christo.
Yes.
Thank you. Jerry Cooper.
Yes.
Maria Deeb.
Yes.
Thank you. Nathan Domi.
Yes.
Thank you. Keith Drunaski. David Fabiano.
Yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Jack.
Yes.
Thank you. Kevin Lair.
Yes.
Thank you. John Willett for Paul Lopez.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Steve O'Brien.
Yes.
Thank you. Dana Oswiani.
Yes.
Thank you. Erman Pedrahita.
Yes.
Thank you. Matt Rieg.
Yes.
Thank you. Patrick Sage.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Solis.
Yes.
Thank you. Eric Stewart.
Yes.
Thank you. Leticia Vargas.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed in the roll call? Madam Chair, this motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, staff. Thank you, members. With that, we will move on to item number 5, which is the regional competitive programs. The 2022 call for projects, fiscal year 2023 PM10 certified street sweepers. This item will be presented by Patrick Stone, the MAG Transportation Improvement Program Supervisor. And this item is for information and discussion as a reminder. Patrick, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please. And one more slide, thank you. So as Madam Chair noted, this is for information and discussion. Start today's conversation, just a brief overview of the fiscal year 2023 PM10 street sweeper process. The applications also noted in the agenda packet can be found online on the MAGTIP website. Notice for the call for projects sent out on August 1st, applications due on September 16th. And there was just over $1.3 million available in fiscal year 2023 CMAQ funding for this call for projects. Next slide, please. Kind of focusing on some key dates. Apologize, hopefully that's somewhat legible for everyone. We're sitting here today, October 11th. reviewing these applications with the street sweeper committee. If there are any comments from the committee, those will then be forwarded on to the air quality TAC. They will meet later this month, go through the scoring and ranking of the street sweepers, and then we'll move into the policy committees in the month of November for formal and final approval of the listing of the street sweepers. As always, just a reminder on street sweepers disposals, because these are federally funded, that there are very specific requirements of the sweepers. So we always like to have that front and center in member agencies' minds. Next slide, please. So there were 10 sweeper applications received this year, just under, I believe, $3 million. Yeah, $2.9 million in funding requested. We had 10 requests from 6 member agencies. And with that, I would open it up for any questions or comments the committee might have on any of the applications that they may have reviewed.
I did have a question, Patrick. What was the total funding available again?
Oh, yeah. So if we can go back up a couple slides, please. One more. Perfect. Thank you. So there's 1.3 million available. And then, as you notice, there's 2.9 million requested. Doing the math, we're obviously more requests than we had funding available. As traditionally happens, and we'll see this going out later this month, we will be doing a closeout process for fiscal year 2023 funding. One of the items that we do put forth in closeout is for member agencies not selected during the call to potentially request closeout funding for that sweeper if they choose to pursue it.
Okay. Questions from the committee members? Right, Maria, looks like you have a question. If you want to unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
Yes, thank you. It's not specific to this call for projects, but just about sweepers. There has been quite desire, especially from the federal government, to go to EV. Is there any consideration for some of the EV sweepers that are out there? I know that they have to meet certain criteria, but I didn't know if MAG has started the discussion with Federal Highways and ADOT.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Deeb, and I know Mr. Giles is on the phone or on the call as well, so I don't know if he may want to jump in on this as well. One thing, Maria, and I think you've seen this and it's moving through the policy committees, is MAG is working on an electrification readiness plan. So I think we're kind of waiting to see the results of that as well. As noted in this call, we were only looking at conventionally fueled sweepers. There was some questions about potentially looking at both CNG and EV type sweepers. I think one thing to note, and we saw this a little bit early in the call process when that question came in, there's a significant price disparity between an EV sweeper and a non-EV sweeper. So there are some questions there. I think questions about eventual disposal of that sweeper. So while not in this call for projects, is certainly food for thought as we move forward and start looking at potentially a call for projects in 2020 for the 2024 sweepers. And Dina, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Of the street committee, I think Patrick, you've covered it pretty well. For this current call for projects, we were just requesting conventionally fueled street sweepers, and then as MAG Regional Council, I had an opportunity to review the plan on how the region was going to electrify vehicles, and we'll probably need to review how
Did that answer your question, Maria?
Yes, and I just wanted to know what was the process, and I know MAG is working on it. It's just the city of Mesa would like to take at least a look if that is possible, as well as what amount of money is allowed in the new infrastructure bill for that to become part of Mesa's fleet. Thanks.
Definitely, we will note that.
David, it looks like you're unmuted. Did you have a question?
It was very difficult to hear earlier on that, the response, the answer to the question. I don't know what was happening technologically, but towards the end of his what he was sharing, it became unintelligible at my end.
So it sounds like Dean, what Dean was trying to say was that we were just looking at conventional for this round, but it's going to be explored later through the EV readiness plan, as well as most likely when we do our next call. Patrick, did I kind of summarize?
Yeah, that's.
If you wanted to add anything?
No, Madam Chair, that really hits it. I think we want to see the results of the electrification readiness plan. To Maria's point, I think it's a valid point. Certainly start looking at, electrification and what that means, or I should say non-conventional fuel. We don't want to exclude other types of sweepers. But yeah, certainly that will be part of the conversation as we develop at least the next call for projects next summer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Okay, I did have one last question for Patrick. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe once the Air Quality Technical Advisory Committee looks at it and evaluates it, does it come back to the Streets Committee or does it move forward through policy?
No, Madam Chair, and good point, good note. We've had some, I think, missteps in previous calls where we didn't cycle the process correctly. The way it's really identified in our guidance and our guidebook is we provide the applications out to the street sweeper or to the street committee, street committee. And if there are any comments from the committee, we certainly pass those along to the air quality TAC to consider those in their review. Ultimately, what happens is the air quality TAC is the ranking and scoring entity. What we can do, depending on which way the committee rolls, as part of my program manager's report for November, I can certainly bring back the results of that ranking, but there's no action for the committee to take at that point.
Okay. All right. You're looking at no other hand raise in the chat. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is request for future agenda items. As Patrick said, it sounds like next month the topic is going to be the discretionary program. However, are there any other requests by the street committee members for an item on the future agenda? All right. Seeing none, we will move on to item number 7, which is updates from member agencies. I'd like to invite any members to share information related to ongoing street-related project activities in your jurisdictions. Do we have any updates from any of the committee members? All right, seeing none. Oh, David, looks like you have your hand raised. Let's hear it.
I could find my hand a lot quicker than I could find the thing on the bottom of the screen.
No worries.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a comment to share. Recently, we've been having some, the town of Gilbert is in the process of working with Maricopa County to improve a 1-mile piece of Ocotillo Road between Val Vista and Greenfield. This is an area that it's mostly county island along both sides of the roadway, with a few properties that are part of the town. A situation that's come up here, the right-of-way and right-of-way dimensions and right-of-way standards has been a significant, I'm in a bone of contention. I'm not trying to be negative there in that comment. Some of where the residents believe that 55 feet for a minor arterial roadway is an appropriate dimension, where the town standards are clearly 65 feet, similar to our neighbors as well. And then a number have shared where they have had conversations. Again, this is anecdotal and it's all hearsay at this point in time, where they've had conversations with the county. It seems like it's mostly with planning and development. And when they've done improvements on their properties, and they have been thinking about it being a 55 feet rather than being 65 feet, which is the town's has been the town standard for multiple decades. So one thing I'd like to just offer here in this committee is that I think we need to look and challenge ourselves so that we have better communication between the different departments and divisions of our organizations, so that those kinds of challenges, we have a couple of residents that are just very, very mad and are trying to utilize and that are reaching out to media and trying to get the media to change engineering and geometry standards based upon the personal desires. The project is a big impact to all of those properties along that right of way. 100%, we acknowledge that and know that, but that doesn't change the safety requirements that exist for site visibility, all of the other uses that have to be in an urban arterial right of way. The different utilities are there. There's just a lot of conflicts, and I'd really like to challenge us to make sure that we have a better communication that occurs interagency and interdepartmental, so that we can hopefully have a clearer answers and more appropriate and correct answers being provided, rather than inaccurate information being shared. So that's something I like to put out there. Don't know that I have an answer to that, Angela, right now, but I do want us to make sure that we continue that conversation and make sure, because I'm sure it happens in other places as well. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, David. I do have a little bit of a response to that, but it looks like John has himself unmuted. You had a comment on that or question?
Oh, I did that by mistake, but
Okay.
no, yeah, I concur with David.
Okay.
We do run into that challenge where residents think they're the experts, or they
Yes.
claim, well, I have an engineering degree, or I did this back east. And so, yeah, I agree.
Okay. Grant, it looks like you have a comment or question?
I do have a comment. Thank you, Madam Chair. In doing that, let's make sure that our communications to our residents are as sound. At one point in time, David, I heard you say minor arterial and the next arterial. Is there a defined difference, and why is there a defined difference, or why not? Some of the standards that we use for arterials certainly are the wider roads and necessary for those items that you mentioned. Some of the standards that you can use for a little bit lesser road, like maybe even a minor arterial, would be different. And why is there one designation versus the other? What makes the difference?
No, great comment, Grant. Thank you. And that's one where I think each jurisdiction has a definition that is pretty clear. In the town of Gilbert, there are minor arterials and major arterials. The right-of-way requirement is the same for both. But that's again, great comment, because we do have different names for similar types of facilities.
And then the public would say, well, why do you have different names if it's the same? And therefore, they're looking at some sort of difference in order to resist the major or the arterial terminology and go with something minor. I've been certainly involved in those discussions many, many, many times. And sometimes I find it a little hard to explain what is the difference between a minor and a major if they look and build the same.
Completely agree. And from the county perspective, yes, I agree. It has very much been a challenge. A lot of it relies on some old regulation, at least from the county side. And yes, it definitely is a department communication that usually can resolve it. But if that communication doesn't occur, then those challenges still exist. I know at the county we've been working towards, not created a solution or anything like that, better communication between the different jurisdictions, because a lot of times it does stem at the county before annexation occurs into a city or a town. So great point, David. So I think that's a future conversation for us to have and continue to have, not just in Gilbert, but in the other jurisdictions. So I think that's a really good point to make, especially during this time of year when development continues throughout the entire county. We're all facing those decisions, and we want to make sure that we do provide, a network throughout the county that is consistent. We're sending a good message to all residents across the board. And so keeping those lines of communications is a great goal for us to have, not only between different jurisdictions, but as a committee at whole, if something comes up, let's talk about it. Potentially, it could be a future item of discussion. So I think we'll have maybe a little bit of discussion with MAG staff on that item, because it's a great point.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? I'm not seeing any other unmuted for future items or updates. All right, we will go to agenda item number 8, which is the next meeting date. The next meeting of the street committee will be on November 8th. MAG staff will be sending out a survey after this meeting to gauge interest in returning to an in-person hybrid meeting. Patrick, did you still have intentions of resending that out?
Apologies, Madam Chair and members of the committee. That was an oversight of me of my speaker notes from the previous month. Copy and paste.
No worries.
No, it was very interesting, and it is a topic for the future. We will definitely have a meeting next month. It'll be virtual, hybrid, or virtual, excuse me. Most likely, unless we have a pending item, I could see December potentially not having a meeting, but back January. I did survey the committee. It was about 50-50 between virtual and hybrid, with most saying even in a hybrid, they would like a virtual option. I think the one note we saw, and we've seen this across many committees, for certain times of the year or certain types of meetings, there might be value in having a hybrid with an encouragement of in-person, where potentially we have presentations by committee members, either deferrals, presentations, scoring for like an arterial bridge or some paving unpaved roads. So I think there's opportunities to have some in-person meetings or hybrid meetings, but I don't think they would be every meeting, and we'd certainly notify the committee well in advance of what the plan is. We should have for November as well the meeting schedule for 2023. That might be an opportunity. Maybe we put that on the agenda, Madam Chair, for next month, and have conversations if there are certain months or meetings next year that might make sense to have a hybrid in-person option.
Good point, Patrick. Yeah, I think that's a good discussion based upon that feedback. And as Patrick said, as each agenda comes out and items come out, we can revisit that topic. We will always have a hybrid for those that aren't able to attend. But there is a value in us meeting together when potentially it's a longer meeting or a meeting that warrants being in person. So we will reevaluate that as we move forward. All right, moving on to the end of our meeting, the adjournment. In order to adjourn, I will need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, David. And do we have a second?
Second, Kevin Lear.
Thank you, Kevin. No vote is required in order to have that. So it is 1:33 and our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for participating, and we will see you next month on November 8th. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.